Hello. Excuse me. Hello. Welcome to another video. I'll make two today because I missed a few, so I'm trying to catch up. Should be good after today, though, then I can just make one a day as usual. But today's video will be on, specifically, my moral system. Now, when I say this, I do not mean in the sense of just moral principles themselves, but rather how I've actually constructed my morals. Would I argue that others should adopt this? Yes, 100%, but that does not necessarily mean you have to, nor will I force you to. See, my moral system is based firmly in pragmatism, at least what I think to be so. And so, while I've done my best to consolidate said morals into a solid ethical framework, in my opinion, it is very distinct from especially the main beliefs of others. I'm definitely not a Kantian. I do not believe completely in utilitarianism as is presented, and I'm not a virtue ethicist. That said, I believe in a very few distinct things following this framework. 1. The best interest of the majority is the main priority. 2. There's objective right and wrong based on solid principles. And 3. Virtue among individuals is in the best interests of the people, this being the majority. But why is this? Why do I hold these beliefs? Well, the majority of individuals must be prioritized when a threat arises in which people will die. Because if people are invaluable, then losing more is a greater loss. Think about it when you say that people have invaluable lives, like infinite value to each life. Tell me, what happens when you have to weigh two individuals to one? Most people will just say, well, two lives versus one, right? So essentially, we turn them into a variable, let's say x for this example. In such a case, losing 2x is worse than losing 1x, yeah? Basic subtraction would indicate such. And so, if it is the case, and we agree that human life is invaluable, we can debate on specific instances, but as a general rule, just for efficiency, one life is a life. Well, in such cases, the majority should be prioritized because it is more of a loss to lose them rather than the few. The few do not suddenly lose their value as individuals, rather, they just are considered the lesser of two evils when it comes to making that choice. And also, for the principles, there are solid principles that people should follow based on pragmatism. Don't lie, don't steal. I should probably note, instead of kill, murder. Because killing is acceptable under certain circumstances. Respect the autonomy of others, etc. Essentially, when you put people alone, what is most efficient when it comes to dealing with them? Being straightforward with them, cooperating, not taking stuff from them, letting them have their own autonomy, and not, murdering them. And this is compounded by natural abilities that people have, regardless of if anyone's around. Put a person in the middle of the woods, no one around. What do they have? Control over their own bodies, control over what they say, control over what they choose to associate with, and where they live. Also, private ownership. These things are valuable, inherently, because they assist humanity when it comes to living. Communication is important, as is association, cooperation, protecting property rights, etc. These things are important to maintaining society, to maintaining trust among people, and to ensuring effective running of said society. As such, they must be maintained. And from this also come the principles regarding the respecting of said rights and abilities. So essentially, you shouldn't do these things because it violates the rights of others. Why shouldn't you violate the rights of others? Because it hurts you and everyone else. After all, if your rights can be violated, then so can theirs, and vice versa. So if you violate someone else's rights, yours too can be violated. It is effectively a contract. I don't step on your turf, you don't step on mine. The moment someone does, all bets are off. And of course, some principles do conflict. For example, if in order to help someone, you must hurt someone else, that is a confliction of your values and your beliefs. Sometimes such things do arise, and in which case, it is the responsibility of the individual to weigh which principle is best in the long term for society and themselves. Now, society should be emphasized because society is beneficial to the individual and often long-term benefits to an individual are outweighed by long-term benefits to the society they live in. For an example, using the above, if you are told not to lie and not to steal, two basic principles, but they suddenly conflict, where, for example, in order to not lie, to tell the truth, you must steal something, somehow. You must weigh whether the theft is the lesser of two evils or the lying. And they are still evil because the principle still holds. It's just a matter of how do I minimize the loss of morality here? How do I minimize the problems? And of course, by following and enforcing said principles while taking care of others, one becomes virtuous. And why is that beneficial to society? Well, if you have a bunch of virtuous people, they aren't lying to each other, so they're honest, they're trustworthy, they're not stealing, so they're not damaging property or otherwise causing issues, they're not murdering, so they're not taking people off the census and just making people unable to choose, and they respect the autonomy of others. Obviously, beneficial to society. The virtuous promote society and maintain it because they do these things, because they have these principles, and because of those principles, the majority benefits. If you can trust one group, even a small group, that helps, because everyone can rely on that group when things go south, and it allows the preservation of any society or system that you have. And the only ones who can participate in such a system are sapient beings, what we might call sapient, and this is due to simple Darwinism. See, when it comes to anything, it doesn't matter if it isn't observed. That's just reality. If you quite literally cannot observe something, it is not possible to be observed, then it is basically irrelevant in terms of most thinking, not because it doesn't matter, but rather because if you can't observe it, you cannot act accordingly to it. A moral system, without those to observe it and adhere to it, dies out. And, in order for that not to be the case, you need those who can observe it to live. And so how does one achieve that? The longevity and continuing to maintain something throughout the generations. Well, reproduction. Either through conversion, in the case of an ideology, or just having kids like any normal person would. You have to maintain that into the future. Think about it like this. It does not matter what humans want if they're dead. It does not matter what monkeys want if they are dead. And as humans are the only ones capable, that we know of actually following a moral code and sticking to it, even when it would be against their survival instincts to do so, well then, in order to preserve a moral system, humans must be the priority. Because otherwise, well, your system doesn't work. Because those considered people in it would be unable to actually follow said rules, said morals. A horse will break said morals, just doing its own thing. So will a chimp, so will a gorilla, so will a cow. And so you cannot include them as persons of interest for such a system, because it quite literally cannot function. Do you have duties to said beings? Yes. Because after all, if you engage in such behaviors to them as is negative, that hurts others. I'm sorry, but we do not benefit from you whipping a cow. We benefit from the cow being taken care of. Because if you don't, something will come around to bite someone, and it won't be us that benefits. It's just reality. And so, in order to preserve the moral system, people must be the priority. Specifically, the sapient must be the priority. Morals don't work. They cannot function without those to observe them. They don't matter if no one cares about them, if no one follows them. You cannot have any successful idea if no one uses it, believes it, holds it dear. That is just truth. It is reality. You may want to argue against it, say, no, I can have it mean something even if no one else believes in it. Really? Can you? Tell me, if no one knew Latin, do you think anyone would care? Do you think anyone would care about Latin at all. Outside of those studying it for abstract historical purposes, no. People wouldn't care about Latin. They never would. Why? Because it doesn't matter. Extinct languages are only interesting to the linguists who study them, to those who try to piece together what they are, what they used to be, etc. Their curiosity to them, even. But to the average person, completely irrelevant. No one cares about a language that no one knows or that no one uses. A moral system does not matter if no one uses it. What is the point of saying this is right and this is wrong if no one's going to follow it? Literally nothing. There is nothing that holds it up as valuable in such a system or situation. And so for a moral system to work, for an ethical model to function, humanity must be prioritized. This goes not just for me and my beliefs, but for everyone, and I would challenge every single ideology on that. Why? Because if it can't function, if your ideas lead to your ideology's death, then your ideology is worthless. A being that dies gets no say, nor should it, because it means nothing. The dead do not speak. They cannot communicate. They have no value outside of that which we give them. Why? Because they can't act. They can't do. They can't follow and they can't engage with such things. That is just how it is. You may disagree, welcome to. But that is what I will stand by, firmly. Thank you for watching. Have a good one.